Hi, so my name is Bethany Yeiser. I'm president of the CURESZ Foundation, which stands for Comprehensive Understanding via Research and Education into Schizophrenia. And I'm here with a bunch of CURESZ Advisory Council members. And also we have three board members with us, Dr. Louis Cady, Dr. Stephen Rush, and Mary Beth De Bord, who's a lawyer, not a doctor. So things have changed drastically during the last couple of months. And tonight we're going to talk just a little bit about how our lives have changed in the face of this virus and hopefully provide some recommendations during this difficult time. Bill, would you introduce yourself briefly and tell us a little bit about who you are and how your life has changed in the face of the coronavirus?
Sure. So my name is Bill McPhee, and in 1987, I was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and I was hospitalized 6 different times. I lived in 3 different group homes. I had a suicide attempt, and I spent 5 years on the couch dealing with a deep, deep, dark depression. However, in 1993, I developed a business plan and went to school, and in March 1994, I started a mental health magazine called SZ Magazine, and I did that for 23 years. And I've written a book in 2014 called To Cry Dry Tear. And what I do now is basically, I'm considered retired, but I do try to sell my book and do different things on my website, and I'm in the process of writing another book.
Mary Beth, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how your life has changed in the face of the coronavirus? And hopefully you have better things to say than bad human nature.
Sure. So I am an attorney by trade, and I'm currently the general counsel of a marketing company that my husband and I both own. And I'm a board member of CURESZ. The way my life has changed, it's been pretty radical change. I have 2 sons who were pursuing advanced degrees in college, and both of their colleges have shut down. So they're at home with us. My husband and I were recent empty nesters of all of 3 months, and then our kids moved back. So that's been a change. I would say as a family unit, I'm really proud of us. We've adapted really well. We've allowed each other to figure things out to the extent each of us has to do that in our own ways. But to provide support and try to get together at least for the evening meal, or if people don't feel like sitting down and eating together, at least talk to each other around that time. So there's a little bit of interaction at that time. As far as business-wise, we're taking a pause in our business because a lot of the marketing that we do is event-based, and events that we facilitate or support our clients with are on hold. So we are counseling our clients through this pandemic and supporting them through that, but we don't have the same amount of work as we would normally have. So we're trying to be creative in terms of how we can support our clients and think of creative strategies down the line when things do open up, so that we can be prepared for that. And it's really, I would say, the most positive thing, which that's how I try and look at things. What are the blessings buried amidst all of the chaos? And the blessings for us are that for the first time, I think, in our family life, we're able to really be present with each other. There aren't pulls on us like the world tends to pull on you when you're responsible and have a job. So although we have those, it's not at the same intensity level. And so the stress with respect to that kind of stress is decreased substantially. So we're able to just sit and relax and talk and watch shows together and laugh. And it's been really great.
Yeah, it's really important to look at this whole tragic situation and find positives in it. more
Mhm.
time with people, meaningful relationships that may not have been this way before. Um, Dr. Cady, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? And later on in our call, we're going to be talking a little bit about teleconferencing. And so, how's your life changed as a husband and as a doctor?
Well, thanks, Bethany. It's great to be on with you. Before I talk about that, I will want to comment on how my life changed when I met you, which was several years ago. And I was a fairly conventionally practicing psychiatrist at the time. And like many, I was intimidated with clozapine, and I didn't have any patience on it. And since then, every one of my schizophrenics has been put on clozapine. Many of them are doing extremely well. One failed it, one failed the new one, Nuplazid, and is now on Caplyta and doing better. But thanks to you, a number of my patients have a much better quality of life right now. And I want to thank you and recognize you for changing my paradigms. That being said, I'm a holistic psychiatrist. I do functional integrative medicine, and I prescribe the rest of the conventional prescription medicines, just like any other allopathic psychiatrist would be doing. Since COVID-19 hit, there have been two things I've noticed. One is that my patient contact has dropped a little bit. Now I'm doing my follow-ups and indeed even some of my evaluations by phone or video conference. And it's been working actually quite well. I will note with a sense of humor that it has done wonders to get patients to their appointments on time, because and inevitably they dial in a few minutes before their appointment. So the bad news is business is down a little bit. The good news is business is down a little bit, which has given me more of an opportunity to be thoughtful and think about what I can do for others during COVID-19. So one of my heroes as a professional speaker is a futurist named Dan Burris, whose website I would recommend to anybody, burris.com. And he did a series of 5 webinars as well about let's not waste the opportunity of COVID-19. He said how your business is going to be on the other side of COVID-19 depends on what you do now during COVID-19. So I asked myself what I could do to help other people, essentially how I could minister to them, how I could give what amounts to free mental health care with no strings attached by just making this information available. And so I decided to do my own 5-part webinar series. And so I've been learning the mysteries of Zoom and social media marketing and follow-ups and so forth. So that's what I've noticed.
Dr. Cady, how do you spell Burris? You said burris.com?
Yes, ma'am. Burrus. Burris. And if any of the folks on the call tonight want to listen to those 5 webinars, he's got it set up on a webpage, burrus.com/hope. And all 5 webinars are there. I'm modeling it with my website. It's going to be katywellness.com/hope. And I'm slowly populating it with the webinars as they occur.
So thank you for sharing that with us, Dr. Cady. Personally, I'm very excited to check that out probably tomorrow and to join you tomorrow as well.
Okay. Thanks, Bethany.
Yeah. Dr. Rush, we see you now. Would you like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about how your life has changed and how your practice has changed as a doctor?
Sure. My name is Stephen Rush, and I work at the University of Cincinnati's Department of Psychiatry. You know, coronavirus, or the COVID pandemic, has kind of flipped my life upside down. So in the first week of March, when we realized that we were not going to be able to see patients in person anymore, our ambulatory services, of which I am the medical director, decided that we needed to be able to continue to serve our patient population adequately. because we wanted to make sure that we didn't have a flood of our patients going to local emergency rooms or even our own psychiatric emergency room with a stay-at-home order. And so I worked for about 2 weeks, about 20 hours a day, to be sure that all of our clinicians, psychiatrists, psychologists, and social workers could continue to see patients via video telehealth or telephone modalities. And that, while I think it took a toll on me, turned out very well. And very quickly we adapted and have continued to see the same number of patients or even slightly more. And we're seeing anything from new patient appointments to follow-ups all via telemedicine in some way, shape, or form. Having said that, personally, taking 2 weeks in kind of panic mode to get everything up and running took a toll and required some significant sleeping on the weekend. Luckily for me, I already work with a job coach, a physician job coach, whose primary role in my life is to prevent burnout from happening. So I continue to see my patients every afternoon in my office as I would normally, only now it's over an iPad. I tend to see that most of my patients are struggling in this time, people who I haven't spoken to maybe in a year because they've just been stable for many years are suddenly very uncertain and not coping very well. And so one thing that I recognize, just to advocate for everybody's mental health, is that I was getting to a point of burnout probably about a week ago, and decided that I need to take a break from my clinical work while I still had to do my administrative stuff, so that I could recuperate from all of this.
Yeah, this seems like a time when more people than ever are in need of mental health services, but at the same time, they have the least access. And I think it'll be interesting when things start to go back to normal to see if you have a higher influx of patients coming in looking for service.
Yeah, we're not certain how that's going to go. We've already opened ourselves up to seeing the frontline clinicians within our own system. We have a wonderful stress center, which is a PTSD focused therapy center, and are available to see people in our own system and really any system that are working on the front line. But in general, I do think all indicators are that we're going to see an uptick in the need for mental health services, and that may be a more mental health and psychiatry may play a bigger role in the future of medicine than it had prior to this.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Carlos, are you with us? I see that you're muted.
Yep, I'm here.
Hi. There you
Hi,
are.
how are you?
Hi. So I wanted to introduce Carlos, who is a nurse practitioner who is thriving despite schizophrenia. And Carlos, can you tell us a bit about yourself and how your life has changed in the face of the pandemic?
Sure. Well, as Bethany so kindly introduced me, I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner. So I work at a variety of community mental health centers. Prior to the pandemic, I had already been working primarily in telepsychiatry. So I was set up quite conveniently for the abrupt transition that many other providers have had to undergo. That being said, the clinics that I see patients that are closed, so a lot of the work has gone even from video conferencing to basically telephone consultations. Other than that, you know, my workload has decreased a little bit, and I've seen an uptick in the general anxiety, if you will, of my clientele. But other than that, you know, I remain fully employed, and I'm healthy and safe and fairly insulated from this pandemic. So I'm very grateful for that. One degree of uncertainty that I have in the air for myself is that I plan on going back to school. I was accepted into the University of Michigan Law School, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen in the fall, if classes are going to be online or if they're going to be on campus. But other than that, I mean, you know, I'm doing quite well, and I'm grateful that I haven't been adversely impacted as far as or beyond the small necessary sacrifices I have to take, such as social distancing or not socializing or going out as much. And I just want to continue to do my part helping patients, and hopefully one day having an impact on population level, the population level through policy.
Yeah, I think that we're all waiting anxiously to see who's going to be back in school come fall. And, I think so much about laboratory research, PhD candidates, and what on earth they're going to have to do with this pandemic. Hopefully it'd be easier to take a law school class online, I would think.
Yep, I've done a lot of online schooling, which has been convenient for me, working part-time and going to school online part-time, or working full-time and going to school online. So it's something that works for me. But at the same time, the sticker cost of a year of law school approaching close to $70,000, and the idea of doing that online is a little bit of a daunting prospect. But if it's necessary, it's necessary.
Mhm.
And I'm still in a good place overall, so I'm very grateful. And again, just want to do my small part to help others.
Yeah, so a few of you are really right on the front lines, especially Carlos, Kristen somewhat working in fast food. And then Dr. Cady and Dr. Rush are probably doing a lot more teleconferencing, not seeing people in person as much. Fear and anxiety at this time. Do most of you see the fear and anxiety lessening at this point, or is it as strong as it's ever been?
I just saw a patient last week, Bethany and friends, and she came in with the chief presenting issue that day of, I'm nervous, I'm going to get COVID-19 and die, I'm isolated at home, and I'm just not getting at it, I don't feel well, and my anxiety is just incredibly severe. This is a woman who has she took one TMS treatment and didn't stick around. She took a course of ECT. That did not keep her permanently out of depression. She has failed Klonopin. She has failed Valium for anxiety. There is no medication this woman has been on that has been useful to her. And so this was actually a very interesting window into what's going on with her. And I identified that there are some psychological things going on here. It's what she is choosing to focus on. After she gave me her litany of woes, I said, well, what are you grateful for in your life? And she had a whole list of things. She lives in a nice house. She has clothes. She has a husband that cares about her. She's got fully funded retirement. She's got health care. She's got dental care. She's got all her teeth. She can ambulate. She has, quote, all my limbs, unquote, she said. And I said, what else you got? She said, oh, well, I have a BMW Z3 convertible and a Jeep Wrangler. And I said, do you get out and drive your BMW convertible sometimes? How can you be depressed and anxious with a BMW convertible? So I had her write a list, more than what we covered in the session, write a list of all of the things that she's grateful for, all of the good in her life, and focus on that. There's a concept in neurolinguistic programming that what you focus on expands. And I think if you focus on misery and anxiety, it can expand. I forget the gentleman's name, but Bill McPhee, I think, was talking about how COVID brought out the worst in some people. And I can see that. It will bring out both the best in people and the worst in people. Reminds me of a quote from Jim Rohn that money makes you more of what you are. If you're a cheap skinflint, it'll make you more of a cheap skinflint. If you're generous, it'll make you more generous. And I think the COVID-19 stressing us can push us in either of those ways in our personality. And it's our responsibility, and I emphasize this to my patients, it's our responsibility to pick the way we're going to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dr. Cady, do you counsel others to find a way to be of service?
Routinely, Mary Beth, that's an excellent question. I have a gentleman in my practice who was severely psychiatrically disorganized in the past. He is now off all of his medications. He was considering going to a theological seminary, but ultimately decided that he was deriving so much satisfaction and was feeling so much of service to people working at the homeless soup kitchens and the shelters here in Evansville, that, and he just wanted to do that. That's what makes him happy. And literally, it makes him happy. His anxiety is gone. His depression is gone. He feels fulfilled. He does have independent wealth because his mother left him well off. But he is focusing on truly being of service to other people. One of the things that I've often suggested to people that are depressed and just totally self-absorbed is, if you think you got problems, go down and feed the homeless at the homeless shelters, and you'll feel a whole lot better about your life. Plus, that's nakedly selfish. Plus, you will be ministering to other people, and that's uplifting.
Yeah, my church has a homeless ministry, which is the main reason I was attracted to this certain church. And so many of the volunteers are risking catching the virus to keep up on meals for these homeless people. You know, it can be a little bit dangerous, and they're continuing.
So for the doctors out there, one of the unique challenges that I felt early on was, I'm a boomer, so I'm in the generation that initially was thought to be at highest risk, and sheltering in place was the best way that I could help the planet. That was an interesting twist of events for me, because I've always been one of those people that's been out there, and what can I do, and where can I be, and how can I help? So have any of your patients talked about that dichotomy and how they can reframe their brain a little bit about that? No?
Mary Beth, it really hasn't come up that way. It's more about anxiety about what's going on, and boredom, and basically not running their brains in the right way. I mean, one of the things I'm going to be talking about tomorrow night is taking advantage of COVID-19, making the most of it. Obviously, there are people that have lost their lives, and it's tragic, and it's horrible, and very unfortunate. But there are some benefits, I think, that will come out of it, and it's up to us to seize those benefits and to try to be positive about the situation.
Well, it's interesting to hear Dr. Rush and you talk about your personal differences of how you're experiencing it as psychiatrists, and also the challenges that each of you have faced and how you're adapting to it. I guess the reason I asked that question is that was my own personal challenge. And the way I got around it was, well, I just have to find a way to be of service here. I have to figure out what my call is now. And it sounds like that's what both of you did in different ways. Yeah. You had to name what was going on, then you had to sit with it and get some perspective, and then move forward. So it sounds like everybody's experiencing that in different ways.
And I find myself returning to some kind of basic adjustment strategies during this time. And that includes kind of 5 steps to maintaining your emotional well-being. That one of our psychiatrists, Dr. Jyoti Sachdeva, had come up with a nice acronym for CARES, K-A-R-E-S. And so talking about making the effort to stay connected with people, whether that is via telephone or texting or video conferencing, certainly avoiding overconsumption of news, staying informed without being addicted, often pointing people to the CDC website instead of network news. Maintaining routines. I think that's something that I've realized a lot of people in all aspects of my life who have been sheltering at home fell out of very quickly. Getting up at the same time, showering every day, getting dressed with fresh clothes every day, regular meal times, regular bed times. Certainly exercise, I think, is one of the most important things when we're dealing with a constant state of stress and our cortisol levels are constantly high. Exercise can really help to reduce those, but also help us to put those really uncomfortable emotions in a place. You know, you can direct those emotions into exercise, and that doesn't mean that you're neglecting them. It means that you're utilizing them, sometimes in a healthy way. And then I often talk to people about specific stress management strategies. Most recently, it's been mindfulness meditation.
Do we feel that being isolated increases stress in ourselves or other people? And if so, how would we deal with that?
Bethany, let me address that. This is coming from two perspectives. One is I used to be a professional musician, a performing and teaching pianist, and I got very used to being very solitary, practicing 6, 7, rarely 8 hours a day, but feeling that I was accomplishing something. And so now I think if it's possible for us to feel like we are accomplishing something, it helps deal with it. So and my hat's off to Dr. Rush for what he did in getting the telepsychiatry up and running. That's fantastic. And we all have to do the best that we can to manage ourselves, manage our emotional state, not burn ourselves out. That's how I've been dealing with it.
Importance of making goals, even small goals, like Dr. Rush was saying, a routine, getting up, taking a shower, eating meals. I like people talking about new hobbies during this time or more online courses. Good.
One of the things, go ahead, Dr. Rush.
As pertains to loneliness, I think that evolutionarily, we are a social species, and that one of the greatest challenges that we face right now is we are kind of going against the grain in terms of the way our brains are wired to function. And loneliness is one of the greatest causes of stress during this time. If you look out into just popular media articles, everybody is talking about how to manage loneliness and how to manage isolation. And I think that's something that we're going to continue to struggle with, as coronavirus will be with us for some time, and we may shelter in place, for periods at a time and then not. It's a really difficult time for people when we cannot have contact with others. And I myself have noticed that a lack of physical contact with other people, just shaking hands or giving a hug, even that can increase loneliness. So being aware of it and talking about it, I think, is really important. I'm glad you asked the question.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Rush, I wonder if we'll ever really get back to where things have been the same. Like, will we go back to shaking hands? Or so many people are working from home now that they can, and will their employers say, well, it was working out while you were working from home? Well, no sense coming back to the office. So things may change and may change permanently in society.
They may, and that can be a very stressful thing to think about, but it also can be, and I would echo Dr. Cady's sentiments that actually can be an opportunity for change, and that society may change in ways we can't predict because of this, but that, as much as it can be sad as we grieve the loss of what we've had for so long and the privilege that we've had to be so healthy and so connected for so long, there may be ways that we can't imagine that this could positively change our society. That's I tend to be optimistic about what the future might hold for this. Hopefully it'll change some things for the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Very insightful. For Carlos, Bill, Daryl, and Kristen, have any of you done teleconferencing with a therapist or a doctor? I mean, I know personally, I think my next appointment is in June. I see my doctor once every 3 months, very briefly. So I don't know if we're going to have it on video chat. But have any of you had appointments with your providers?
I see my psychiatrist once a month and I see my therapist once a month, and we've gone both to telephone sessions. So I've seen my psychiatrist twice by phone and my therapist once by phone.
Mhm.
I'll have another appointment later this week with my therapist, which will still be by phone.
How is that working out for you? Is that been productive or is it limited?
It's okay. It's harder. It's harder with my therapist because I feel like I have to fill the silences instead of being in her office where I can look at other things and, you know, kind of get off track. I don't, you know, I mean, I don't have those visual cues because we're just talking on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Something I do want to bring up that I don't know if anybody else has experienced is I use a long-term injectable, and thank God I have a background as a nurse that my psychiatrist is willing to let me do my own injections during this time. But I was able to get zero support from the mental health center and from our local alcohol, drug, and mental health center board of being able to get my injection in person because everyone was on telehealth. And their suggestion was just go back on pills till this is over.
Is that what you did?
No, I actually, because I'm a nurse, I can give my own injection. But if I didn't have that background as a nurse, I would be on pills now instead of my long-acting injectable because that's all the mental health center was offering me as emergency care.
That's terrible. Yeah.
Here at Columbus, that seems to be the routine. It seems like everybody's doing that. You're on long-acting injection, you go to pills.
Yeah. See, I get an injection. I get an injection every 4 weeks. I get 40 milligrams of flunaxle, and I just went last Thursday for my appointment. And there's a nurse that's all she does 3 days a week is to see people and give them their injection and take their blood pressure and weight if you want. But so I go there, and it's an essential service. I get my injection. I could never, I shouldn't say never, but I don't know if I'd ever really be able, like you, Christian, to give yourself the injection and that. So, and I would be, I kind of would be reluctant to go back on pills because I've been going on for 30 years with this injection, and now I have the philosophy: if it's not broke, don't fix it. You know.
I do plan to follow up with our alcohol, drug, and mental health board when offices and facilities open, because I would like them to come up with a plan to be a safety net for people who see independent psychiatrists. But I plan to follow up with them and see if there's anything they can do once we get back to, you know, psychiatry offices and mental health centers being open. Because that was just not an acceptable response to me.
Yeah, it's key that almost every study that's ever been done, comparing a pill to a long-acting injection, the long-acting injection does better. And I think it's a real failure of our mental health system here in Columbus that they're not keeping people on their injections.
Yeah, we have a CURESZ board member, a doctor, and he was talking about how he met his patient in a parking lot and gave him an injection through the window of his car. So it'd be nice if we had more doctors who were willing to do whatever it takes, as this doctor did. But Dr. Cady, you have a lot of patients on clozapine. Are these patients getting their clozapine without the blood draw these days?
Yes, some of them are, although some of my patients are very dutiful. They have a standing CBC order. And I've been seeing CBCs coming through. I know because I get them, I sign them, I say, okay for clozapine, and my staff sends it on to the REMS people. But I am aware that we've got a 30-day grace period now. So that's going to be helpful for a lot of people. By the way, I'll mention that I have never had a patient that has had their white count, their absolute neutrophil count drop to the dangerously low level. It just, it hasn't happened. So I think it's generally a safe medication, but certainly it should be monitored. But I don't think it's the killer med that I used to be afraid of.
Well, we're kind of running out of time. We have about 8 minutes left. We talk about the importance of the daily routine. Are there any suggestions from any of you about coping strategies that have worked for you personally or in your practice? Carlos, you're probably seeing a lot of people who are asking for advice on coping strategies in your psychiatric nurse practitioner practice. Do you have any advice for us? What are you seeing?
Sure. Well, I think what's generally applicable, in normal circumstances is certainly also applicable in these circumstances. I mean, I'll speak to myself personally, but for me, ensuring adequate sleep is one of the most critical factors for ensuring mental well-being. I think I can't say with absolute certainty of causation, but I can say that there's definitely a correlation. When I don't sleep, when I start getting down to 6, 5, 4 hours of sleep, the next day my mood certainly declines, and I may even experience more psychotic symptoms, more hallucinations, more delusions. So I have found that maintaining my sleep regimen, going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, including trying to make that effort on the weekends, is a critical factor for my recovery. As well as other coping mechanisms that I can speak to. For myself, I try to have something that's, outside of my interest and my sometimes all-consuming interest in mental health and the work I do. And that for me is making music with a friend, Matt Racher. And, that's also doubles as a source of peer support. It's also someone who's got lived experience with schizophrenia who I can relate to. There's a sense of camaraderie there. There's a bonding that's there that's unique that only comes from sharing that lived experience. And lastly, family support has been very, critical for my recovery. And it's something that, if people have access to, they should take advantage of that and lean into that. I know not everyone is as privileged as I am in my recovery, having a supportive mother and having a supportive family there at all times. But, certainly these coping factors, maintaining my sleep, accessing my support network of friends and family, and maintaining some sense of normalcy through hobbies or through routine have kept me on a steady path so far. And it's, I think, sage and sound advice for other people during this pandemic and in their recoveries.
Yeah, I have been living with my parents for almost 7 weeks, which I haven't seen them for a long time. But yeah, I don't know how people cope with this pandemic if they're living by themselves. I don't know if I could do that.
Something that gave me a lot of joy that I've done in the last 2.5 weeks is I've got a bird feeder, and I put it in front of my window very close, and I see them that they're very close up and everything like that. And but I talk to them, but believe me, they don't talk back to me. Just to clarify that. But it's brought a lot of joy. Seeing the birds brought a lot of joy to me.
It's wonderful.
Bethany, one of the things that I've done when I've had decisions to make or I have had concerns in the past is that I've used the technique of journaling. I would say the technique of journaling rather than journaling, because if you use the term journaling to most people, it's like they think, oh, it's dear diary. Today was a good day. That's not the kind of journaling I'm talking about. I'm talking about you think on paper. And in fact, I'll be covering that tomorrow night. Jim Rohn, one of my mentors, said that if you use a journal, the solution to your problems materializes between your brain and the paper. The actual act of writing it. And writing it is better than typing it, because you can type really, many of us can type really fast. But if you write it, it causes your brain to slow down to think about it. And I've often used this with patients. Write down what is your concern, and then write down what you're going to do about it. Is it a reasonable concern or is it an irrational concern? And then if it's an irrational concern, what's next? And if it's a reasonable concern, what is your mitigation strategy? I found that very helpful.
Journaling, interesting. I like that, the difference between writing and typing. We type so much, we lose perspective of the benefits of writing. Yeah. Caregiver support. Is there any advice that we would give to caregivers, especially people who are caregiving for a loved one with severe mental illness? Any suggestions?
I have a lot of time with my patients who have treatment refractory schizophrenia, have very good relationships with family members, and often create a care team that involves the primary support person in that person's life, whether it's a wife or a parent or a husband or even boyfriend or girlfriend, sister, brother. And I have found that when we have appointments, especially if I know that things are maybe a little bit tougher these days, asking that support system to be there for the appointment, as long as the patient is amenable to that, can be really helpful. I think that sometimes things that we are feeling in our internal process comes out more succinctly, concisely, and maybe more easily when talking to your psychiatrist. And that dialogue that happens kind of breaks down what's going on, so that caregivers know what's going on with their family member or loved one, but then also are there to be a part of what the plan is moving forward. And I always try to incorporate them into having a role in moving forward. And that is, how are you going to be in part, in terms of being a care team member, how do you fit into these goals, and what is it that you can do to feel empowered to help your loved one, but also help your loved one know that they are being taken care of.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rush. Yeah, I'll just also give a commercial. Mary Beth and I have finally launched our CURESZ Foundation Friends initiative. So we're looking for caregivers with lots of experience caregiving to mentor caregivers who have a loved one who's fairly newly diagnosed with schizophrenia, who are kind of at the beginning of the journey. So we've been starting that virtually, and we have about 5 mentors so far. So we're excited about that. It's 7 o'clock. We should be ending soon. Are there any final thoughts about anything we've talked about tonight, including coping strategies, how your life has changed, recommendations you have for other people? Okay. Yeah, well, as we continue going through through this difficult time with this pandemic, I hope we all stay well. And I hope our loved ones are careful, and I know that we'll get through this together. I would like to say thank you to all of you so much for joining me. I know you're busy, especially our doctors, and Mary Beth, our lawyer, Kristen, Daryl, Bill, and Carlos. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you at another conference call.
Thank you, Bethany.
Thanks, Bethany.
Bye.
Good night, Bethany. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night, everybody.